Welcome to the S1-E podcast, a space to connect, communicate, and collaborate for the advancement of the kingdom in North America and beyond. Here we will discuss the disciple-making movement that is happening in this Western context and the return to God's design for discipleship, church, and life.
We're just going to be talking about what it looks like to connect, communicate, and collaborate in a couple of different areas. Yeah, is there anything you guys would want to share in way of like what it looks like to collaborate to see community transformation, both Matthew 25 and Matthew 28, in your context?
And so I think it's a great question because when we talk about DMM, CPM, all the terms that we throw away, disciple making, multiplying movements, church planting movements, we really understand the generational pieces of multiplying disciples and simple or home churches, right? We sort of get the DMM piece right about that, okay?
Yeah.
But then in our kingdom pathway, like Matthew 25 is in there. We should be those kind of disciples that feed the hungry, that clothe the naked, that visit the prisoner, etc. So he said, when you've done it to the least of these, my brethren, you've done it unto me. So collaboration as disciples in churches at a community and a city level should emerge as salt and light. And because we typically focus only on the DMM piece of that, in Tampa we say that we exist to launch and grow disciple multiplying movements that transform communities. So both Matthew 28 and 25, not either or. So I think the absence of that collaboration, both at a community level as churches and the church, and then also from city to city, which is one thing I think is cool about Dori being here. We're in Tampa. She's in San Francisco with disciples and churches, and we're doing the same thing with one another as a model.
Okay, so what I hear you saying is that you can't have one before the other. It's simultaneous. Like there has to be collaboration for there to be like a healthy disciple-making movement.
So you see Jesus, when John the Baptist said, hey, are you the one? Or should we wait for somebody else? And he's like, when he was there, it was like, hey, go back and tell John what you've heard and seen. The lame walk, the blind see, the dead are raised, and to the poor, the gospel is preached. Was it he that's not offended in me? So you see him modeling both those things. So is it really movement without those things?
What does that look like, Dori, for you guys in your context? You're in the Bay Area. What does it look like to both live out Matthew 25 and Matthew 28?
When I first started, I asked the question, like, where is Jesus? And then I looked into the scripture. He says, where the master is, the servants will be. And making me realize that if Jesus is going to walk in town today, where is he going to be? Is he going to be inside the church preaching? Or is he going to be with the broken, with the hurt, with the last, the lost, the least? And maybe even, with the people that are separated from their homes, maybe with refugees. So that's when I realized maybe if we going to start the movement, we should start with that.
Yeah, amen.
Yeah. So that's why I started prayer walking my area and to look for these refugees, to look for people who are foreigners, who are new to the place, and I started connecting with these people and being intentional about it. Like, for example, shopping in a different grocery, meeting the cashier, meeting people in my area and starting to go into their homes and just hang out with them.
Yeah, I think sometimes we don't realize it's not really complicated to love our neighbor. And something that might seem so simple, Dori just said, I just started going to a different grocery store and meeting the cashier and talking to somebody I never talked to before because I'm in a different area that I've never been to. And I think about in Tampa, so I really started doing something last year. We started a learning initiative, I'll call it, with some refugees in our community who were behind in school learning because they moved to the United States. They had very little education in the countries they came from. They were thrown here in the public school system. So we have 14-year-olds who are learning and reading at a first grade level or math at a first grade level. So when that started, they asked me to help coordinate lunches. I didn't think it was a big deal. It's like, okay, I'll coordinate some lunches. But I didn't realize that how the impact that had on those students who would see me come in, and I brought lunches myself in addition to coordinating all the people. So I got termed affectionately the lunch lady. And when I thought it just like, oh, I'm just the lunch lady, I kind of rolled my eyes. And one of the teachers stood up and she said, no, you have no idea what you've done for the past year. You have no idea the impact you have on these students. And you're serving for the past 8 months these students for something as simple as a sandwich, a turkey sandwich or a hamburger, whatever that was. So we think about it's not real complicated programs and initiatives and big events.
Yeah,
it's really the simple things like meeting somebody at a grocery store or taking a lunch to 10 students.
That's amazing.
So
you think about what Jesus said. If you give one of these little ones a cup of water, my name. Well, that's what it comes from inside of a community that we did prayer walk in, that we did find a personal peace in, that we stayed in that community, and we began to do that stuff and stay in that community, and that's where that education, and lots of those kids and their families have come to faith, have been baptized, and now there's an education assistance ministry as disciples and a church. It's just that church doesn't look like church as we know it. It's outside, inside of a community, a geographical area, working with others to do both Matthew 28 and 25. And I think a cool thing is, if I can get Dori to talk about it, is the way that in Houston, they're doing the same thing, right? Outside, inside the community as disciples and churches, okay? And then from Houston, we had a group of hip-hop artists that are completely disciples and churches that came to Tampa, and they influenced us there. And now that recon team is actually planning on a trip into the harvest in the Bay Area, right? So what's that going to look like there, Dori?
Well, first of all, the reason why we need Trey to be there at San Francisco is because we have people who've been trying to reach out to the poor, the homeless, the broken, and we're facing a lot of difficulties. We didn't know how to connect them. When we share the gospel with them, these people actually wanted to change, but we didn't want to just go, cool story, I'll come back to see you tomorrow in the streets, Why don't we just actually bring the help and help their lives to turn around? So when Trey was talking to me, I was like, oh, you guys have that. Why don't you guys just come on over to encourage us and to share with us, like, what have you guys been doing that, and even help us to imagine what can actually happen in San Francisco. Whatever's happening in Houston is great. I'm sure we're not going to bring the whole formula to where San Francisco is, but I'm sure there's certain things that we can learn from.
Amen.
So what they have, they're sharing. They're going to be a blessing, receive a blessing, be strengthened, encouraged. But what do they have? What they're going to? They're visiting the churches and the church in San Francisco with people that are obeying, and they're both growing and they're going simultaneously, and that's just a picture of 3 places. What if that happened with everywhere, with everyone? Then that looks remarkably like John 17.
Amen.
To we.
Yeah, that's so good. I was just talking with someone a few minutes ago, and we were talking about how the Lord gifts and entrusts certain pieces of His heart to churches in different regions. And I think of Revelation 2 and 3, where it's being written to the church in these different places, and He says to the one whose eyes are flaming fire, and then to another church that's this piece, and it's all identifying pieces, parts of Jesus, and each church holds one of those. And so just see that that is true in today's context, that it's not different from then, but the church in San Francisco to the church in Tampa to the church in Indianapolis to the church in Louisville, we all have something to entrust and to to give and to receive. And so that's why it's so important that we go from one another, and then we live out both like simultaneously Matthew 25 and Matthew 28 to make disciples, and then to serve and to love, that it can't happen like one and then the other, but because we all have that to give. And so I just like totally agree and see like it's so important what you guys are talking about, and like the church in the Bay Area is strengthened because of the church in Tampa and the church in Houston like coming, and then like simultaneously. That's so good. Yeah, you guys have kind of already been touching on this, but is there any ways that you guys would say, or even to share, what it looks like to serve in your local context? I think, Stacey, you were just sharing a little bit about that within the education initiative. And yeah, I mean, everyone has different pieces, but would you guys even just mind sharing locally in your day by day, like from your home to your church to the city to city, what that looks like to just serve?
I think Stacey could just talk about last month, what that might have looked
Yeah,
like for the last month for
totally
our home. So
Yeah.
then she could probably do it in order and make a lot more sense.
No. So
Three
I mean,
separate groups. So.
you know, the joke around us and anybody that comes to our house realizes very quickly our front door is a revolving door.
Yeah.
I mean, it's constantly people are coming in and out. We don't even lock the door anymore, right? And the other day I put a note on it that said, "I'm gone, come on in." You know, because I was expecting somebody, nobody was home. But we just have so many people come to Tampa to see this disciple making model, the house church model that we have adopted back in 2013. And what that means is when they come to say, they want to stay for several days. They want to be able to visit the different house churches. They want to be able to talk to different individuals. They want to be able to see the community where we're working on community transformation. So what we want to do is we want to offer them, extend that to them, and we allow them to come and stay in our home.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had up to 10 to 12 guests in our home before, and the month of May, 4 out of 5 weekends, I had guests in my home. That means turning over a lot of bed sheets, washing a lot of towels, preparing a lot of meals.
Yeah.
But that's kind of who Lee and I are. That's, you know, I found out very
beautiful.
quickly. I didn't think I had the gift of hospitality, but I found out when I married Lee and we had all these people coming to stay that, okay, yeah, I guess I do. So yeah, that's just the way that we serve our fellow brothers and sisters who want to get additional information on how to do it, and they can take it back to their community. And so we've had people from literally all over the world come and stay at our house.
Yeah.
So I think that picture is the same thing, and Dori can speak to it. So, but Dori's been to Tampa, but I've met Amber and I've met her husband, and that's all relational. And so I know that that's the same thing, like into prisons there. There's a pattern and rhythm of flow, just like you were talking about it, that is Jesus.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. And I think it's so important in our culture and context that there is the inertia of maybe a different kind of model that we're grateful for every good thing from it. But this is, I don't think it's anything new, actually, Hannah.
Yeah.
I think we're being bold enough to do something old with
The first
one another.
Yeah.
And so in our context, like we do, that's what we're doing. And we just invite people into hear and see how we're doing that as disciples in the churches and crossing over like those. So it's interesting, like when we saw each other last, I think it was in Indianapolis with one another. And I think about like you playing the guitar with those little kids in the basement, and the massive blessing that I got from hearing that, from being there and sharing what I had there. The same thing in a household there, and a community there, and that we know one another and we connect, communicate, and collaborate across cities, because you're from Grand Rapids, right? Yeah, so just think about that. Grand Rapids to Tampa to Indianapolis to San Francisco, like around the, like all those to Houston. Wow. Jesus is amazing.
Amen. Is there anything else that you guys would share about just serving All right, Dori, would you want to share anything about just even what it's looking like for the
Start
church?
realizing that what you're doing, it's like I'm learning from what you're doing. I start realizing that more people are actually coming to my home and staying with me as well.
Yeah.
So we
It happens. It's insidious. It's
It creeps in and all of a sudden you're doing it.
You just had Nathan that
I just
stopped
had
by.
Nathan.
Yeah.
And I from Michigan.
Yeah.
And I had somebody from Florida, and I also had Stanley
And
from
then Zach
Florida.
Medlock.
Zach,
Yeah.
and then Zach actually brought a team from Tennessee last week.
Didn't Paul come last year?
And Paul came last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I just had a group from Tennessee last week, from Memphis, and they just wanted to see what it looks like.
Yeah,
Praise
changes
To do
everything.
ministries, yeah. So I think they were supposed to go overseas somewhere to serve, but because of COVID, we couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
But it actually benefits to help them to see what they can actually do at home.
right here.
Right here, yeah.
Yeah.
And if you ask me what serving looks like, well, besides cooking and changing bed sheets and taking them out to show them what we're doing. We actually do a lot of prayer walking and sometimes door knocking. And then through that, God answers our prayers, and we're able to meet like people, like Yemeni people, and so I found a person of peace near my home, about like 5 minutes away from my home.
Yeah.
And what ministry looks like is like usually I'll be at her place at around like 8 at night, and the gospel conversation usually starts at 10 in the evening, and I wouldn't leave her house until like 1 in the morning.
Wow.
And this is their time, their hours. This is their
How they function.
How they function. Yeah. But loving and serving means like you should be with them.
Yeah. Wow.
And
Amen.
and share the meal together on the floor. I never really understand it, but it actually works. Sharing the same plate. I love it. Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing.
So.
And staying there. See, that's the key is like,
Yeah.
I think one of the challenges, like sometimes around DMM, CPM, is like we blow in, blow up, and blow out.
Yeah.
But you stay and see that emerge into more, which is the entry is, simple. You just heard her.
Yeah.
Prayer walking, person of
Amen.
peace, gospel conversations, right? But you're like, that general area, oh, hey, that needs to spread. And what does that look like? That's where the community transformation piece comes in. So that then you can actually multiply from that level to others when they're sending out. So you multiply not only from house to house, but to community, to cities, to regions, to our nation. And that's what we're actually working on together now, which is super exciting.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's so good. I think one thing that I heard you guys say that I would love for you guys to even maybe elaborate on more is that you guys have had the opportunity to invite people in to come and see, like to taste and see, that they might go back and go and do the same. Why would you say that it's important for people to taste and see or come and hear and see versus just hearing?
Yeah, because like think about what Paul modeled, Timothy, what you've heard and seen. Pass on to faithful people. It's not only just hearing about it. We have to be salt and light. And salt and light needs to be heard and seen. And we think a lot more is caught than is taught. That if we're functioning more as churches as opposed to training centers so that it's experiential, I think that's super important. And it's super important not only from an obedience perspective, but actually showing them how that should be modeled in other places. So being able to live inside of that, both short term, near term, and long term, then I think that's a better model, and I think that's how we actually help and grow and spread with one another.
Yeah, I'll go back to something I said, it's not complicated, right? For them to, like, maybe if they're on a phone call with Lee and he's like, and they're like, whoa, this sounds overwhelming and it's too much and it's too busy, it's too complicated. when they actually come and see the simplicity of what serving looks like, it makes them realize, I think, that, oh yeah, I can do this. I can go meet somebody in their home. I can go start a house church with a Hispanic family in their home on a Friday night at at 7:00. And they also come and see that it's not perfect. So have we been doing it since 2013? Yeah. But is it? No, it's messy and sometimes it's ugly. But we're doing it. It's the obedience of doing what we are called to do as Jesus followers. So I think seeing it and realizing that it's nothing complicated and it's nothing fancy. It's just doing life with others.
All right. So as I have heard you guys talk about a lot about collaborating across teams, organizations, locations. How would you guys encourage someone who's not yet doing that to step into that? Like, what would your encouragement be if you look at someone and they're not doing that? How would you
how did you do how did that actually work with us relationally, Dori? What happened? What did you do?
Well, when I know what God's calling me to do, which is like getting into this idea of church planting movement, I heard a lot of good things about how a movement was launching overseas. It was great, but what does that mean to us? How does church look like? I need to see it. So I actually called Curtis, and Curtis gave me a few numbers. So I called Lee, and Lee was like, we got this, we got that, we got that. I'm like, yes, but just come on and see. So when I was there, actually seeing that church can be different, it really inspired me to go, okay, maybe I can bring this back home. Maybe this is how church should be. This is how loving one another should be. And it helps me gives me courage to start, something that's very, I would say similar to what Florida has, but we can kind of reimagine, church in our context. Yeah. So with that, I was realizing that what happened with the group from Tennessee is that I actually helped them to see what ministry looks like. So I'm glad that they were here.
So the same thing. So I can just use, because it's relational to me and it's like with one another. So interestingly, someone that we train in our home that went on a road trip, So Becky wound up in Michigan with you, encouraged, strengthened. She came from Indianapolis to Tampa, but then went there. And that can be strengthened from going and growing and sharing with one another. Yeah. So the same thing, sending people, the answer to the question is really what Stacey said. It's, where are we at? Where are we not? Where we are, 100%. Where we are, take a step. We want to connect people by proximity and language, locally, nationally, and globally. We want to strengthen, encourage, equip, do all those things where we are, so that you actually see it emerging and manifesting, correct? As salt and light in communities and in cities. But then you can totally go to those places and minister your giftings so that others that are there can be strengthened and go back. And then we go to where it's not. So we both have a growing and a going strategy. If you don't have it yet, you need to see it, hear it. And if I got anybody that's closer to Michigan, I'm not inviting them to Tampa. Amen. I'm like, hey, Hannah, I know that they're going to be able to go to the church that meets in your home, They're going to be able to see how that works with kids, They're going to see what it goes to look like. We're working on the outworking of these things there, and we're all connected. And we're not attached to labels and logos and orgs. We're functioning as disciples and churches and even kingdom economics inside, existing inside of there, to have both growing and going strategies with everywhere, with everyone.
That's good.
And that's a long answer to a short question. Sorry.
It's great. No, it's good stuff.
I don't think God designed us He didn't design us to do life alone.
Amen.
We're not designed to live on an island by ourselves. So I think by going and collaborating with others, we encourage one another, we bless one another, and I think there's an expectation there that we do collaborate with one another.
Mhm.
And so that we are partners in all of this together, because we all, I think it was Kelly that said it earlier, we all have the same common vision and we're all working toward the same goal.
Yeah.
So that requires us to partner and collaborate with one another, regardless of affiliations or whatever that is.
Yeah, because people ask, I used to get this question, so is one body an organization? No. Just a biblical language. Collaboration is, there's just one body. And he prays that we might be one. So there are 58 one another's. All the one another's that I can do for my home, we can do those one another's with one another, with my word I'm getting ready to use, at every fractal level.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's no boundaries, there's no barriers, there's no white space that divides us in Jesus.
Yeah. What would you guys say, like, something that I'm thinking about right now is what does it look like even in my neighborhood context, like not even like the city, to acknowledge, obviously, like we are in a place where the gospel has penetrated and there are people in full alignment with the way we're going about it, but there's ministries, there's church buildings, like on every, like so many corners where I live. And so something I've been just thinking about is how can I like come in to serve, but also collaborate with the other ministries and churches in my area.
That's a great question.
And like the question that's like, that all I know to do to come in with is like, hey, to come in and share the vision that like Jesus is coming back and he's worthy of a pure bride and disciples who make disciples, like to see the city and the world transformed to the ends of the earth. And I'm doing this. Do you want to come and do it too? And just asking like, how can I serve you? This is what I've been entrusted with. How can I serve you? That's kind of like my brain of like, when I go home next week, I genuinely plan to like knock on doors and or like meet people and do that. Is there any, like how would you guys, after like, in different ways doing that in your city, what encouragement would you give me?
So practically for us, it's kind of cool. So we've been in this one basic area, like we're spread out over 3 counties, but this one area that Becky and others live inside of, there are a person apiece that said, man, we got more churches here than liquor stores. Yeah, that's really true. But how do you work with one another when they're not exactly your brand or your logo, and but they're all siloed up? So we discovered that we can actually reach out and pursue relationship with our brothers and sisters that have maybe a little kind of different church model. And guess what I found out? Now, these people are open to praying together. So man, I've actually gotten people from other churches that we go prayer walking together for the community, okay? Like we can agree that we want to see the kingdom of God come in this community. So then inside of being able to go prayer walking with churches and people getting outside the building and praying over the ground with one another, I've been able to share like simple tools that we have inside there.
That's
Here, actually, you know what? Here's a piece of paper with a prayer wheel on it, that could help you individually in your home, okay, even in your church. So freely you receive, freely give, but it's the same way intentionally pursuing relationship with not just individuals, but with people that might walk a little bit different way, but are still part of the body. So in our community, we actually collaborate with a traditional church, okay, that gave us basically a building to put a gym in. Like that was a part of their grounds, okay? Here you can have it, and you can have your gym that functions as a fitness center that you do 3/3 groups in, okay? Here, you can have that for free. Thanks.
Wow.
That happened because of relation. That happened because of relationship, stewarding that relationship, okay? Sharing just like you did, but not bailing on it. Continuing
being
that.
persistent.
Like, hey, just like she said, hey, let's go to lunch. Let's talk. How's that going? Listen, and doing that with one another. So that's a way, I think, stewarding relationships. Prayer, I think everyone can connect around prayer outside of the building, so to speak, and sharing what we have, just like what you said, simply, and not being heavy-handed around
Yeah,
that.
that's good.
Not really having an agenda.
Yeah, just going in with relationship, and then when something's beneficial or there seems to be a need, then offering what you have. That's honestly really helpful.
Doing stuff on the field, like we have a field. Like, in other words, people they want to volunteer for things. Yeah, we need the people to come out here to cook the food for a block party, okay, and be able to share at that. You're still one. Like you're doing those things, and isn't that the church doing that in the daily distribution with one another? Weren't there feeding points? Weren't there widows that needed to be cared for? It doesn't have to look exactly the same to be one. Like it's a peculiar challenge in our context to realize that we can totally be one and not be like in this is us, this is you over here. Like we can pursue unity with one another in so many different ways.
For us, actually, I was recently connected to somebody in the nearby church, and she says she's going to start a prayer party at her apartment complex. I'm like, that sounds great, prayer party. I'm going to join. Invite all your friends, in the apartment complex, and we're just going to do it. So that's one way, and the other way is that I have been doing trainings with some of the gospel, some of the organizations, like Christian organizations, helping them to maybe teach to share 3 circles. In fact, I was just in one earlier, and sometimes they'll invite me to share about what church can be, like reimagine church. And at first I'm like, I'm not sure they're gonna take it, or maybe they'll be upset with me. But I wasn't really thinking of bringing about like the entire group of like 100 or 200 to kind of do what I do. But we ended up having about like 20 of them or 30 of them who were actually willing to go out to the streets, go out to care for the poor, praying for the homeless. And through that, there were brothers and sisters who wanted to keep going. And eventually they asked me, what else can we do? What else can we do? And I was like, well, the next thing you wanted to do is you wanted to disciple some of the people that you got connected with. And eventually that's how it actually played out. So a couple of the brothers and sisters they're actually from another church, but they ended up discipling people where they found, in the streets, and actually helped them to turn their lives around. So, and I realized that had I say no to the training, which is my tendency, I'm like, I don't want to do that. And I say no, all these is not going to happen.
Yeah.
So you just filter through relationships. And what I hear is like, some of them said, hey, can we go out and do that with you? So that's the thing, if you actually are going out, especially during COVID, and you're feeding people, and they sort of like, what is that? Oh, well, it's this, And they're just sort of tagging on. And you're seeing by their doing continued interest in those things. That's really how simple it actually is what Stacey, you're saying, like working in life with one another, with the ones that he gives to you, where he gives them to you at. It's pretty simple, actually.
Okay, you all kind of touched on this a lot. I know there's some stuff happening in Tampa on the Bay Area. What is happening in your networks now that it's started as simple churches, individual churches, home by home, and has formed into more of a city church? And this simple church, home by home, is multiplied to be larger. What has been birthed out of that to just multiply what is happening in a Matthew 25 and Matthew 28 context? You guys are talking about an education initiative, gym. Is there anything else you guys would share that has kind of birthed out of that?
I think the coolest thing that's happened out of is like the 2414 network of individuals, churches, and all that stuff that's globally, people trying to walk this way. Not 2414 is not an organization, but people are connected and communicating and collaborating. And one of the major movement, I don't think it's a strategy, I think it's love multiplies.
Amen.
But what we're able to do is, by this shall all men know you're my disciples, that you have love one for another. We're able to basically serve our suffering brothers and sisters globally, okay, that are dying for the gospel. And I think it's just like Jesus, like when we talk about like that I might know you, the power of your resurrection, to experience that, the fellowship of your suffering, being made conformable to your image at your death. As we sow into that as our brothers and sisters, that he spreads that. And I think we're seeing what the enemy meant as disciples and churches, and I think a global movement of God. Like we define movements, and we actually silo up movements. I'm not saying it's not happening there, but I think the whole thing is the ecclesia emerging among every tribe, nation, language, and tongue. And one thing that we're beginning to be able to do is to share on purpose, intentionally, that way, what we are doing at a micro level as city churches where we're sharing. But actually to do that because we know where we are and we know where it's not, and we're connecting and we're doing that. We need to get better at that. And I think people think like strategy, man, love should be a strategy. And that love as a strategy of sharing freely with those to reach every tribe, nation, language, and tongue is one of the things that I'm most excited about, of what we're actually getting to obey and try to share with others. So I appreciate the question.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah, I think that if we start a church in our home, and if we stay the same, like if we have 10 people that come to our house church, whether it's Wednesday night or Sunday morning or Tuesday night, whatever it is, and if we just stay intact, we're no different than, it's no different from going to a legacy or traditional church, right? So the idea is that our church doesn't stay this cute little tight-knit family of 10. The idea is to eventually expand. So we have a couple in our house church that started a house church on Sunday nights with some students that they were teaching English as a second language to. That has now expanded to, they not only do their primary church is our Sunday morning group at our house. They do one on Sunday night, but they just this week started one on Friday mornings with a different group of people. The idea is not for us to stay together, but to move and touch other people. So this couple now is a part of 3 different house churches with lost people. So in our little group, we're all followers of Jesus, right? They are now starting house churches with lost people that are saying, yeah, I'll come and have dinner with you on Sunday night, and yeah, I'll read the Bible with you. One of those has a lady in it who is now studying scripture with her family that lives in another country. And we have another family that's getting ready to leave Tampa and move up to New York. And they will be starting a house church up there with the potential of reaching lost people. So when you talk about like, what does this look like? We really want to spread. We don't want to just, we don't move from the 4 walls of this building to the 4 walls of our house. It really is about doing more and reaching more people and getting to where the lost are. So when these couples leave our house church, our goal is to reach our neighbors, that gated community. Like, our neighbors are lost. Yeah. We know our neighbors are lost. Right?
So question I have is, so long term, because y'all said that family that helped to start the Sunday night gathering and then the time where they like come together on Friday mornings, will they long term be in all 3, or will they long term eventually step out of this and then come back to like what happens next?
So they have been a part of our, and I used to never would invite anybody into our home church. Our home church has been going with me and Stacey, sustainable for 8 years, right?
Yeah.
But we allowed these people, to come in for a period of time, and they're totally obeying,
Yeah.
So it's not one of those other ones that's closer to them will become their primary spiritual family, I believe, as believers emerge there, And the other ones will just be their Like those are just model assists, okay? But one thing that I did discover, and I learned it from my wife who didn't get trained, okay, and from my grandma in our home church. I used to never let anybody attend our home church. I would say, nope, it has to be on their terms.
You gotta go.
You gotta go.
I'll come to
do
your
that.
house.
You gotta go and do that there.
Yeah.
Well, if people don't go like in the communities that we go into, okay, that's a hard thing to overcome, like people in their homes, okay? So allowing those people for, like, you're not going to stay here forever, but to actually become a part of the community and understand what it is and to get healed and to get whole, okay? And then begin to obey and be set out. We've done that a lot over 8 years. And so actually our home church has functioned as a home church and as a sending agency and as a training center. And we continue to operate that way. So the short answer to your question is they're eventually pretty shortly going to leave and not be in our home church anymore. And the other two will just be the same things. Those are model emphasis for that. But we actually think obviously generationally, that's obviously, that's fourth generation at those, and that's been less than a year. But I'm not sure that would have happened with that couple if we hadn't allowed them to hang out inside of the family.
Yeah. And welcome them through your doors and to your table.
Yeah. But that's a little opposite of what actually is presented to you inside of where you're equipped. And I'm saying that we need to be able to hear from one another, not necessarily just the manual. I learned that from my wife and my grandma.
I'm challenged in that too because I don't know why, but have had a perspective of I want to invite people into every part of my life, but not the 3/3 time within that context. And it can be with those people, but that time is genuine, walls up. And I'm just challenged to question why, why that? Because I do wholeheartedly. Jesus invited. I mean, he had his 12 that he was and a few others within that were his tight people, and he would draw back away with. But those were those that he was discipling. But then he just, so it's good stuff. It's challenging to do and to look at and to ask why have we maybe drawn lines? Not that they're bad inherently, but why are they there?
Yeah, so you see, I think of those same things where you actually read there's 12, they were getting it and stuff, and he chose 72 others also, and they went out did they not know him? Or are you trying to make that so, that was third generation? Really? I think there was a relationship with Jesus there,
Sometimes in a city context, you might have to create the community in order to send them out.
Totally.
Because these people are looking for a community, right? So the word will get them to Jesus. But sometimes the fellowship and the community will get them to Jesus first before they actually get to the word.
Right.
And and also with the service, sometimes we can bring people and serve together. Not I gotta be more open-minded, to allow that to happen.
We're so myopic. When we read Acts chapter 2, and they continued steadfast in the apostles' doctrine and fellowship and breaking of bread, in our mind we have a way that we think about that. And just what you say, let's say they saw that broader fellowship, maybe that was the thing, how that the Lord was adding to the church. So it's all multiplication, but it comes out of being. We're being disciples that love, that function, that are salt and light. And we just think it's concrete, linear, sequential, and we're executing inside of it. It's more flowing than that. And that's really difficult for people that are concrete, linear, sequential.
Yeah,
that's why younger people are actually better. Younger, I can do that.
Yeah.
Because what I find is people that have less exposure, that are younger, dinosaur, that have less exposure to that dynamic and are, they're actually better at it. They're not encumbered by a lot of this stuff. So.
Yeah. It makes me, what you're saying, Dori, makes me think of how, it within DMM and just movement mentality sometimes, especially as people are starting, they get stuck on, but I need to multiply. I can't have people come to my home because I need to multiply. Yeah. And we have to add in order to multiply. Yeah. We can't multiply what we don't have. And so it's so important that we have it in our home and in our hearts and in our families and at our tables before we can actually like go and like teach others to do the same. And so I think that's like a beautiful revelation and just like encourage you in that, honestly, because like, yeah, like if you don't have family, then how do you multiply family? Like if you don't have a husband and wife, they can't multiply. And so it's like the same.
I gotta tell this story. So the couple that's in our house have been there for a year with their 7 kids, right? They've been walking this out as husband and wife and their kids. And then they got exposed to DMN and they started really saying, oh, you know, we got to focus on the training and we're looking for fourth soil people, you know. And they're like, the wife, you know, is like, she's prophetic and she's like, something's wrong about this, you know, like I don't get it, you know. And they had this lady that was like in their community from before that was totally trying to serve the poor that they were friends with. And they totally like abandoned that relationship. Because I just got to be focused on this. And what God spoke to them about is exactly the same stuff that you just talked about. It's like, hey, we actually have to have this, okay, with these people, okay? And we can't be that way so stringently in order to actually have the very thing that we want to spread.
Yeah.
So it's the way that we look at maybe guys, others talking about the tools and the training. We have to have it. We have to be it. And then and actually people need to understand that nothing happens because of the cause, not because of the tools. So that's the key.
That's good. Sweet. Well, thank you guys for sharing your heart. I'm excited to see what the Lord's going to do as he just continues to unfold stuff in Tampa and in the Bay Area, and even as we get to learn from you all in Michigan.
Thank you for listening to the L1A podcast. If you are interested in learning more about this topic or getting connected with the other disciple makers in your area, visit loveoneanother.life. Again, that's loveoneanother.life.